All right, welcome everybody. You have Zach Hodges here from Cybersecurity Solutions. I want to first thank everyone for attending this webinar. We look to demystify a little bit of CMMC and give everyone a good understanding of what is to come, what's here, and what is to come. So here are the companies that are a part. Everyone should be able to see the slide. So here are the partners. So we have Cybersecurity Solutions and CySec hosting the event. And we've invited some great people from Florida Makes to help us host this GoToMeeting webinar as well. We have Kevin Carr, CEO, here. We've included the Florida Department of Economic Opportunity, as well as we have Ben Chobane and Akin Basoy here as well, from the CMMC accreditation body. So on the agenda for today, we're going to go over brief introductions of the team. We're going to then transition into Mr. Kevin Carr from Florida Makes. CEO is going to speak. Then Horatio Masonette from Cybersecurity Solutions will be giving an overview of CMMC, talk about some recent events that have gone on this year. And then Ben's going to come in. He's the training committee chair. He's going to go over a few slides, but the big piece for Ben and Akin is going to be later on in the question and answer session, where they're gonna one-on-one be able to answer a lot of the questions. So just for everyone's understanding, this is a recorded webinar. There will be handouts that'll be provided. The slides can be provided to the group as well. Again, the session is recorded. At the end, we're going to have that 30 minutes for any of your questions and answers to be resolved, and for everyone to understand. You can ask questions in the questions section here, and our team is going to compile these questions throughout. I know that a lot of you can't speak to us to raise your hand and ask questions, but if you ask them in that section, we'll make sure that we get them addressed during the end piece. We're going to go after Ben. We're gonna go into Felice Flake is going to speak on levels 1 through 5 explained. She's also going to go over some key terms. Kind of set an understanding for what each level is and break it down what it means when we're talking level 1 through 5. And then we're going to bring in Akin to kind of wrap it up. He's gonna give the power punch at the end and wrap it up. He's got some information. I know there's a lot of manufacturers here today, so he's got some information that's going to help a lot of the manufacturing companies and just overall anyone interested in CMMC in general. All right. So as I mentioned, who was on already, here's just a pictorial view of who all is on. We have Horatio, Felice, Akin, Kevin, and Ben, and then myself, Zach Hodges, COO for Cybersecurity Solutions. All right, so to kick it off, we're going to invite Mr. Kevin Carr, CEO of Florida Makes, to go through his slides. And for the presenters, just say next slide, and I'll moderate. I'll go to the next slide for you.
All right, thanks, Zach, and thank you, Zach and Horatio, for inviting me to participate. So let's just give you a little bit of background on Florida Makes and what we're doing in cybersecurity beyond this event that we're partnering with this team on. So next slide. Next slide after this. So our mission, we work, if you're familiar with, there's a program, a national program called the Manufacturing Extension Partnership, which is run out of the National Institute of Standards and Technology, which is where some of the cybersecurity standards originated. But one of the programs there is called the Manufacturing Extension Partnership, and it's really directed at helping small, medium-sized manufacturers throughout the country adopt newer, more advanced manufacturing methods, technologies, business best practices. And the mission of it is really to kind of improve the productivity and the technological performance of those firms. It was modeled after agricultural extension, which was around since 1945. And this program actually has been around since it was signed into law by Reagan in 1988. So because of our NIST root, it's natural that we would be involving ourselves in the distribution and promulgation, if you will, of cybersecurity standards. Florida Makes represents that entity that provides that services in the state of Florida. And we do that through a network. We're more of a network than we are a single location. And our network nodes, if you will, are generally and mainly the manufacturing associations located throughout the state. So just about wherever you are in the state, there's an MEP connector to you, probably within an hour or a little bit more of your location. It's a little bit further when you get up into the panhandle, but in general, we're covering all corners of the state, and we have people that we can come out and work with your companies. Next slide. So I would define our services in really three value streams. The principal one, because of our NIST roots, has to deal with technology adoption. And when NIST first started the program, they came out of the gate completely focused on hardware, software, technology. But as the program evolved, we began to really sort of adopt a broader definition of what technology is, and also those components that sort of relate to the success of technology. So when we define what we do, we're basically in three areas: technology adoption, talent development, which is generally the biggest demand item for most of the firms we work with. They need very capable, skilled talent. And then finally, business growth, helping companies find, new markets, new customers, ways of increasing and leveraging the core competencies that they have to grow their businesses. Next slide. So to give you a sense of manufacturing in the country, there's 347,000 manufacturers throughout the U.S., and most of them are 99% of them are small and medium sized, meaning under 500. In Florida, as an example, 80% of them are under 20-person employee operations. And it's estimated based on this study here that 50% of them lack basic cyber controls. So it's a big issue. It's a big issue when you begin to look at it from a defense perspective. You're only as strong as that vulnerability that you have in your supply chain for somebody to hack into your system of supply or your information system. So it's a very big issue, and it becomes critical when it comes to dealing with the very small firms, because they're hard to get to and they're largely neglected by very large consulting entities. Next slide, please. So to give you a sense of the impact of defense in Florida, we're the second largest sort of defense footprint in the country in terms of aerospace and products and parts. We've got 20 major military installations and 3 unified combatant commands. So this is a very, very important part of the Florida economy. Sometimes people just completely think of tourism and stop. But beyond tourism, manufacturing is big, believe it or not, and defense is very big. I want to say it's about 85 billion, a billion. So it's a very big sector, and it's very important to the Florida economy, as important, if not more important in my mind than tourism. But that's me. I'm not in tourism. Next slide. So where the MEP, the program that we're tethered to nationally, comes in is there was a national small manufacturer cybersecurity enhancement hack, which really focuses on DoD utilizing the MEP network nationally as its means of getting to these very small defense suppliers. We're talking tier N at this point. So that is something that charted us to take up this mission and to work hand in hand with the DoD, generally through the Office of Economic Adjustment, to go out and provide outreach to these firms and help them become compliant. A lot of our efforts so far have been focused on awareness, but as we begin to turn towards the direction of needing to be compliant, a lot of our work will turn more hands-on with partners like Zach and like Horatio, working with trying to help them companies comply. Next slide. One of the things that we'll be doing, and we've been funded now as a subrecipient, if you will, to a contract from the Department of Defense to Florida Department of Economic Opportunity to provide some basic cybersecurity services over the next year or so. And that'll come in two forms. Principally, we're going to be doing about 10 boot camps, again, focused on awareness. These are things you need to know, and they're very interactive boot camps to give companies an opportunity to ask questions, much like you will today, and get the answers that they need on how to become compliant. And then build into that a grant that was given to DEO. Built into that grant is the ability to go out and actually do some cyber assessments with some companies. So I encourage you to stay tuned to what we're doing, what DEO is doing along those lines, and we'll keep people posted on our web pages as to the schedule of those events. The first one, next slide, which is the Kickoff Event, is a forum that we're doing in partnership with the Associated Industries of Florida and with the Workers' Compensation Institute, in partnership with DEO and with the Department of Defense Office of Economic Adjustment. And this will be a 2-day event. This was originally intended to be in person at a very large event, which was scheduled to have about 10,000 people in Orlando. As you might imagine, that went away, and that got scaled back to a smaller event in person, and then it got scaled back to a virtual event. But we're excited because the people that we're going to have coming to speak at this event, beginning with Senator Rubio and also Katie Arrington from the Department of Defense. We had hoped to have them in person, but they've agreed to participate in a virtual forum. But this will be a 2-day event which goes through a lot of learning on the CMMC model, on what it means to each of these business. And then as the second day, we will be focusing on how to implement that, and a lot of Q&A and interaction like you'll see here today. So I encourage you to participate in that event as well. And if you're interested, there's a discount for those people participating today to participate in that September event. So as a follow-up, we'll be passing to AIF the names of the companies participating so that when you do go to register, you will be able to get that discount. Next slide. And it's my last slide, next to last slide, but wherever you're at, I'm assuming everybody's in Florida. I'm going to assume most people on the call are manufacturers. This is just a list of the contacts. If you need to, after today, learn more about how you can get assistance, help in this area, maybe participate, do some of those assessments, participate in some of those boot camps. This is your principal point of contact. This is how we meet the marketplace. It's principally through these business advisors that you see listed here and scattered throughout the state. You can call them, you can call us directly. I think the next slide has my contact information. Next slide, please. Has my contact information there if you didn't get a response from any of those people we just listed, but also on the call, but hiding behind the scenes on this call is Zoraida Velasco, who's our Vice President for External Affairs, and Daniel Krug, who is really our Program Manager for all things cybersecurity that are going to be coming out of Florida Makes. So I encourage you to reach out to any one of the three of us or anyone on that previous slide, and we will get you to that solution. And with that, I'll be quiet and get to the feature speakers and the feature topic and in my infomercial here. So thank you, Zach.
Yes, thank you, Kevin. I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy day to join this with us. And for anyone else interested, please reach out to Florida Makes. You can reach out to us as well. We have a great relationship with them, and we can get you pointed to the right people. And for anyone that has questions, I see questions starting to come in. If we're going to take a break after this next session, I'm going to filter through some of those questions, and as we have time throughout, we'll answer a few, and then again, we'll transition them over to the question and answer period where you can ask questions to any of the speakers that present today. All right, so next up we have Horatio Masonette. He's my co-founder. He's the CEO, president of Cybersecurity Solutions, and he's going to give an overview of some of the basic CMMC principles, as well as talk through some recent events. Horatio, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Zach. Hey, good morning, everybody. Really excited to be here to discuss this topic. I mean, it's really, really important that we do it, especially in the times that we find ourselves in this nation, and our adversaries constantly trying to find ways to steal our technology. So excited to be here to talk about this topic. Zach mentioned a few questions. Don't worry, I know you guys saw, if you saw the panel at the top, you saw Kevin drop. We still have some Florida Makes representatives that are present, and they will be able to answer any kind of Florida Makes associated questions. But I'm pretty sure that if we cannot get them the answer, we'll reach out to Kevin and we'll make sure that you get them for you. So let's go ahead and get started. So CMMC, there's 17 capabilities domains really associated with this, and these 17 capabilities domains are spread across 5 processes within the CMMC body has come up with, and be able to identify it and make it very easy for organizations to quickly identify what level of maturity when it comes to cybersecurity they will need to comply, and that's based on the work that you do, that's based on the contract that you have. So it's really important that that we look at these maturity levels, and really important for you to identify where do you want to play and where are some of those contracts going to be landing on that you're going to be participating. It's at the beginning and in the rollout, there's not going to be that many contracts, and I know that some of our speakers might touch on that. So I'm gonna let that for them to expand on it later. But we are going to be able to move those requirements in a way that it allows the whole manufacturing industry to adjust the way that it operates to meet these compliances and continue to support. At the end of the day, you're supporting the warfighter. Some of you are supporting the NASA astronauts. So all these stuff, these key individuals should be protected when it comes to this. And that's, at the end of the day, that's what CMMC is looking for. So let's go ahead to the next slide, Zach. So there are multiple timelines, right? As we mentioned, starting in January was the first version that was released, and I do have to give props to the board and the body, the accrediting body. They did set that deadline a while back, and they met it. They actually released that version 1 on that January, and everything subsequent after that has been met in times, all the way to the MOU that was signed a few months after that. Where the Pentagon and the AB came to an agreement on how what are the responsibilities for each, and when it comes to this with this program. July and August, we're looking more of the professional assessors starting to get trained. We do have the chair of the training committee here, so he's going to be expanding on where are they at when it comes to that. When it comes to the training of the assessors, there are many companies that are already taking actions and getting themselves prepared up to be assessed, and they are really anxious to finally hear that there are assessors in the market that they could tap into. So he's going to be, Ben is going to be expanding on that conversation. Then in September, we expect a few of the first contracts to be out with the levels of requirements that they're going to have, and then there's going to be a gradual ramp up between 2020 and 2026. So the market and the government, the DoD understands that these are major changes that some organizations have to do, specifically those small organizations, as Kevin said, that get left out by some of these major consultancy companies. And that's where companies like ours are stepping in to be able to fill that gap and make sure that everybody, not just the large players, have somebody that can help them and assist them through this journey. Let's go ahead to the next slide, Zach. So what are the major drivers? So if you remember, there was a big compliance requirement that needed to be done by 2017, which was the NIS 800-171. And that was a self-attestation, right? So you were pretty much attesting that you complied with the controls. The DoD did not necessarily send an auditor to verify. It was more, pretty much developing that plan of actions. Well, even with that, with the self-attestation program and the plan of actions being developed, the government was still losing about $600 billion a year when it came to technology being stolen. Carrie Arrington was going to be on the September event, which I would say please go and attend. It's going to be a fantastic event. She put it in a good ways in some other webinar that she's done, where she's talking about $4,000 for every American is the stolen amount that our adversary has stolen from us when it comes to technology through different cyber attacks. So this is very important, right? We all pay taxes to make sure that our military, that are the people that are protecting our freedom and our rights, that they have an edge when it comes to in the war fighting domain, and that gap is closing. The same thing with our science divisions in NASA, with our technology partners when it comes to the private sector, getting the information done. I mean, it's really easy for them to spend billions of dollars on research and then have an adversary come in and overnight to be able to take all those years and all the in research that was spent. So we want to make sure that we are protecting that information. At the end of the day, that's what the DoD is looking for. And then we got the False Claims Act, the 2019 cases when we were looking at cyber attacks that took place, and companies were pretty much attesting that they were compliant, but they were not really compliant with those. So it's really important that if you had a poem and you had a plan of actions that was developed for you to comply with 171, that you're looking to start implementing that plan of action, specifically before this auditors comes, because they're going to be checking to make sure that you're compliant with. This is where the DoD is changing things up, and they're actually going to be verifying that you're compliant before you're able to bid on that contract. Let's go ahead and move to the next slide, Zach, please. This is Elaine Lord. She's the Undersecretary for Undersecretary of Defense, and she made the statement of, we need small and medium businesses in our defense industrial base, and we need to retain them, right? So they are recognizing that you're needed. You play a big part in this ecosystem. And how do we protect them, and what do we do to enforce these securities? Is really important that we come up with new creative ways. And as I said, if the big players are not going to do it, it's up to organizations like Cybersecurity Solutions to step up and be able to assist and drive this new wave and this new requirement. Let's go ahead and move to the next slide. So the supply chain, right? So there are multiple organizations. So we're concentrating today in manufacturing because we have the Florida Makes, right? We're doing the partnership with Florida Makes, and we know that a lot of you attending today are manufacturers, but there are other industries that are attached to the supply chain, right? There are software developers, there are aerospace companies, and the idea is that these companies, there are contracts that are given out, right? And then those prime companies, they partner up with smaller companies, and it goes down the chain on who's going to supply what for that, right? So when you look at the F-35 might be blowing Lockheed design. However, the people supplying the parts, the cables, the brackets, all those requirements are not necessarily met by Lockheed, right? Those are subcontracted out. When you subcontract those out, a lot of times they're sharing those blueprints. And that's what our adversaries have really found. They really found that stealing from Lockheed is a little bit harder. Stealing from the Pentagon is harder too. But they've discovered that they can go out to the supply chain and hack and attack all these small firms and be able to gather this information and get the same blueprints that it would have if they would have gone after Lockheed. So this is why it's really important in understanding that DoD supply chain and how the entire supply chain should be stepping forward and moving forward when it comes to that security mindset. Let's go ahead to the next slide, Zach. So what are some of the things that they're looking at is the networks, the endpoint, management of the devices. Endpoint being your computer, your cell phone, your laptop, where you're currently operating on, where you exchange information. And we do see this a lot of the times when we deal with companies where they're believing that they're necessarily not sharing a lot of information out, CUI information or control information, but some of this information, it's actually being shared on emails, it's being shared on chats, it's being shared to Gmail addresses at times, and not necessarily by the people that control it, but maybe you have an engineer that wants to work at home, and it's not that they're stealing it, they just really want to work at home, they really want to help out, and they're dedicated, and they end up emailing it to their Gmail, where they then pretty much violated all these regulations. So it's very important to understand that perimeter defense inside your environment is important. And that is not just to protect information coming in and making sure that nobody tries to hack in. That is also to prevent any kind of leakage. We call it data loss prevention, DLP. So there has to be some measures. So that perimeter and defining that perimeter is really important in order to operate. And then once that perimeter is established, then you need to monitor it, right? We need to know how packets are coming in and out, what is being sent out, what is being received. We want to make sure that the blueprints that we're going to go ahead and design brackets for an F-35 wing did actually come from the government, that the email was not intercepted before it came to your inbox and changed by a few degrees and then deposited into your mailbox, and now all the brackets that you developed are bad or do not match what the F-35 really needs in order to operate, right? The F-35 being a fighter jet. So you can see how crucial it is, right? We're going to put American soldiers' lives in there, or we're going to go to a war fighter engagement, a war engagement, and our brackets are not going to be meeting the specs that it needs when that pilot turns that airplane. So really important defining that, and really important to monitor it. Identifying the access management and the secure application, that goes part of defining that perimeter. So I'm not going to go ahead and expand on that. Let's go ahead to the next slide. Now, after identifying those perimeters and understanding that we really need to monitor what comes in and out of this network, we are going to then talk about the cyber workforce. And as we know, we've heard it a lot. The human factor is the weakest link always. We can have all this security, and all it really takes is one person to click an email. And a lot of people tend to use that as the excuse on, well, maybe we shouldn't be spending so much on security. I mean, the government itself get hacked. So, you know, and I'm too little. I'm not the government, so why would they come after me? I have a 5-person firm here, and they're really not going to be targeting me. It's really important to understand that a lot of these threat actors, all they're doing is scanning the network, looking for the low-hanging fruit. They're not necessarily looking for a specific target. They're just going across, and they happen to stumble up on you because you don't have the proper perimeters. We want to make sure that they have they're going to try to take some of that information and target your employees. But it's really important to also, the same way that you're defining that perimeter, the same way you're defining the tools that will operate in that perimeter, it's important to you for you to determine what are you going to do with your employees. You need to train them. You need to talk to them about security. What are the most common threats? Right now, here I can tell you, a lot of these threats have to do with COVID, right? We're very anxious when it comes to COVID, specifically in the times that we're operating today. So any kind of help assistance or any kind of programs that the government might be putting out and comes out in an email, people are more likely to click on it because that is something that they're hungry today, and our adversaries know. So being able to identify that those emails are coming from reputable sources, that it hasn't been tampered with, and where can they be open and how they should be interacted. Should they really enable that enable macro line that appears on Microsoft Word sometimes when we use it? I'm pretty sure everybody has seen it that appears. Should you really be enabling those macro? Is it going to do something in the background? There are many things to consider. So all these topics that I just mentioned and rattled off quickly, those are bases that you need to take time, and you need to train your workforce into understanding what the security requirements are. It's really important that it's not just about the tools. And there was an article put up in Forbes magazine, I think it was last month, that said that the companies that have the most security tools are sometimes the ones that are more at risk. And that comes from not having standardized practice when it comes to what to update. How do they integrate with each other? Are you really analyzing that information, or are you just putting it, and because you have many security tools, you feel that nothing else needs to be done about it, and your staff doesn't get trained, right? So we want to make sure that that is that we spread the love across all the tools that we need, and also across what do we do inside. And this is what CMMC is asking. CMMC is not sitting there asking the board. It's not sitting there asking you to buy expensive tools. That's not the intent of this regulation. The idea is to get you to think in a way that you're protecting that information. So you don't have to buy the $100,000 firewall, but at least buy a firewall, and then inside expand your knowledge of your workforce. And how can they be trained? Consider cybersecurity a critical part of your business. The same way that we take security and safety, the same way that we take safety with OSHA requirements and making sure that everybody is doing things properly so that they don't lose a limb, they don't hurt themselves. Cybersecurity should also be in that mindset because you're trusted with the defense requirements and technology that our adversaries are so hungry for. Next slide, Zach. And then finally, in the government, the same way that we have unclassified secret, top secret domains, you got your mission partner networks when it comes to other countries too. It's really important that this information is identified. So what this is showing you is the government divides the information that they have in tiers. We need to also identify that. And part of CMMC is really understanding that, right? So your engineer that's assigning the brackets, they might need access to the CUI and the QA individual also. But the people on the floor might not need access to that CUI. They don't need to see those documents. They don't need to have access on the computer for those documents so that they can print it or they can email it out, right? So things are, make sure that the information is divided by the responsibilities and what you need. It's always better to have the least access mentality, right? What do you need to do your job, and or less than to give them more, right? You don't give them access to your financials. I know that's something that every company protects, right? Not all your employees have access to every single financial thing, even though there's some new tech companies coming out where they're fully transparent and that's just the way they operate. Most companies protect their financials, protect that CUI and that government information you've been entrusted. Put it in different levels. Make sure that you are analyzing how that approach is going to be. Sounds a lot, but you can work with a good consultant, a good partner that will sit down with you and it will make this happen. And that's one of the most key things and important things that I can that you can take from this webinar today is cybersecurity is not, it doesn't have to be expensive and it doesn't have to be complicated. These are things that finding the good partner that can walk with you will ensure that you meet all these requirements and that your system is better protected and safe. And let's go ahead to the next slide, Zach. Finally, IT product supply chain management. We've talked about everything that I mentioned is cybersecurity related, and now we got to talk about IT products, and it's separate, believe it or not. IT tries to connect the world and make things very simple for you to share information with. That's what IT does. However, you want to make sure that you send this information out in a secure way, and that's what cybersecurity does. So in IT, I just want to send an email. I'll go ahead and click on it and send an email out. And as long as the other person got it, I don't mind. Cybersecurity is going to care if somebody touched it. Did it come from a trusted source? So it's really important to look at those two things separate and make sure that just because you have IT doesn't mean you are secure and you're compliant. Let's go ahead to the next slide. Encryption is just a technique that is used to make sure that information is secure, especially now. We get a lot of responses when we go to people in the industry and companies, and we try to ask these companies, hey, when you're backing up this information in the cloud, is that information encrypted? And there's always not a good understanding of what do we mean by encryption. And that is because in the public cloud, your information is sitting with everybody. That means when you're backing up to Office 365, when you're backing up even to Azure on the commercial product, is that way. Now, if you're buying services from the government cloud of Microsoft Office 365, by default, they are a little bit more secured, so they are going to encrypt your information. But if you're using the regular version, the $8, $12 a person version, that information is not sitting in Microsoft servers that are encrypted. And that information is also not stored only in the US, as there's a requirement for that. It's also stored across data centers that are all over the world for Microsoft. So it's really important to understand that when you're backing up to the cloud, is the information is encrypted? Are there controls to make sure that they only get backed up to US data centers in order to comply and make sure that that information is not exposed outside of the US? So just because you have Microsoft Office 365 and you're on the cloud, or the Google Suite, or your servers are in Amazon AWS, these companies also are not going to be your cybersecurity personnel. They have what is known as a shared security model. And what they end up doing in this shared security model is that they protect the data center side. They make sure that nobody can just walk into the data center and touch that server. They make sure that you have redundant power, redundant internet, that they keep track and they record who gets by and who touches those racks. That is an actual US employee that's walking around the data center and is not plugging USB drives. That's the physical security, and the infrastructure security is what they protect. But when it comes to your data, they say it on their contract. It is your responsibility to make sure the data is encrypted. It is your responsibility to make sure that the information is protected, that the passwords are not stolen, that you have multi-factor enabled. So they give you all the things that they don't do. So a lot of people just automatically think that because they're in the cloud, Microsoft is protecting their information. They're really not. So please go to the next slide. And obviously the operational environment, right? So positioning yourself, the weapon systems, it's really important. That's what you're supporting at the end of the day, and that's where most of your products are being used in this Department of Defense operational environment. Next slide. Critical infrastructure for the U.S. is very important. That's also something to consider. With the protection for the power plants. So at the end of the day, there's a whole supply chain, right? So they provide the power that powers you to make the products that powers. So it's that whole mindset. The government have come out under CISA. They've come out with new regulations for these power companies and people and operators that are working in the critical infrastructure environment. So they are also getting more and more requirements added to them to make sure that they are secure, and that a simple cyber attack doesn't just shut down an entire city, for example. Next slide. So some of as I mentioned, some of the most recent events, and you can see the dates here, they're July dates, they happened this year, is the cost of China intellectual property theft. I just kind of threw it out there. I mentioned some of the costs that's coming by everybody, and this is constant. And it's not just a cyber attack. It's also when you're considering what equipment do you buy to put in your manufacturing plant. Cameras like network equipment as Huawei is no longer allowed on government networks, and they're not going to be allowed for you to have them and use them in your network. So if you have some of these Chinese brands, it's really important for you to identify what brands are those, so that you do not end up purchasing equipment, investing a lot of money into it, just to find out that because you have them, you no longer meet that requirement. And the reason that they are being, they are being not allowed to be part of it is because they, the Chinese government has a vested interest in those companies, and we have found material inside those equipment that has been stealing and taking backdoor and stealing information from the people that are using those networks. So it's really important that we take a look at it, but this is all new news and nothing that that is old. This is all current. So let's go ahead and move to the next slide, Zach. It has been growing, as you can see, year after year, and where, so when we give out the slides and you'll get a time to look at it, you'll be able to see this data. Let's go ahead to the next slide. Now, one of the things that was identified from that IP theft and intellectual property theft was that they were targeting, as I mentioned, not just the Pentagon, but here's some good reports showing that they're going after our contractors. And this is what the DoD has recognized, and that's why they're pushing for this CMMC requirement. And that's why they are partnering with organizations like Florida Makes to make sure that you get the boot camps you are instructed and what is it that is expected of you. They are subsidizing some cybersecurity scans. They are going to be providing more guidance, and as the program grows and moves, there's going to be more and more practices that are going to be developed on how to properly do it between now, 2020, and 2026. So they're not just making this requirement and leaving you on the ground. They know that they have to invest into helping you achieve the level of security that they want to achieve. And they also understand that that's a pass-on cost, right? Because you have to invest in cybersecurity. Now, when you bid on a contract, you are going to probably put a little bit more because you had more expenses when you were developing it. So the cost of business go up, the cost of the product goes up. They understand that, and they're willing to accept that as long as that information is protected, right? At the end of the day, that's the goal. Again, CMMC is not a requirement for you to have all these security tools and all these security practices. CMMC is a maturity level. Are you taking security and cybersecurity seriously enough that we can trust you with this classified information for you to develop and participate in this program, right? So it's definitely something that's very important when it comes to it. And the government try to do it, right? They try to do the self-attestation and let all these companies and these corporations dictate for themselves what security was going to look like. But as you saw in the previous graphs, there's been an increase in a hockey stick and ramp of how all these attacks are happening at that level, which is why now they're going to be making sure that those things are implemented. At the same time, it helps the community. If you suffer a cyber attack and you have all the information on how did they get in, what did they do, now they're able to start writing studies and telling the rest of the companies how can they protect themselves from a cyber attack, right? And that's another thing. It's when we were when our partners were getting attacked and the government will go out to do an investigation, we couldn't find information that we could learn from so that we can prevent a similar attack from happening somewhere else. So at the end of the day, it's also that hive mentality where we want to all work together like the bees do in a hive in order to protect ourselves from any kind of threat that is out there. Next slide, Zach. Now, obviously, it's important to know who your partners are. So a lot of your organizations, you outsource your IT support. Are these companies that are IT support, does China has a vested interest in them? Are they outside of the US? Are they going to be making sure that your systems are secure? Are they secure themselves? Like this article said, that a lot of the hacks that are taking place today are taking place at the MSP, which is managed service provider level, is taking place at that outsourced IT, because if they hack that, they know that they have a bunch of other companies that are underneath that they can steal from. So they become a really good and prime target for it. Let's go ahead to the next slide. And also CMMC is going to make it mandatory for these organizations that you are going to be partnering with to meet the same level of security that you have. So it's not just you that they're going to look at. They are going to also make sure that who you're partnering with is meeting those levels of requirements. So, it's not like they're just singling you out as a manufacturer. They're looking at the entire supply chain. And with the FBI doing 1,000 investigations, I mean, it's all tech by China. These are just the most recent events that we have for information to show why is it so important and why is CMMC might be looked at something that's not fair. You're putting more on top of us. There's a real reason for it, and that is that our technology is being specifically targeted by our adversaries and is being stolen. And the edge and the money and the time that it takes for us to get there is being shortened by all these other countries. Their path to get the same technology is being shortened because they just steal it from us. Let's go ahead to the next slide. All right. So thank you very much, everyone, for hearing me out. We will be transitioning to Ben, or I'm going to be rolling it over to Zach, because I think Zach promised you guys a break in between here. So thank you again, and I'll look forward to your questions later on. Zach?
Yes, thank you so much, Horatio. Appreciate the overview that you provided. So we're going to go into just a quick 5-minute break. I've sat on a lot of these webinars where people talk for 2 hours straight, and I understand your pain. So 5-minute break. We'll be back at let's say 10:52 Eastern time, and we'll introduce Ben, and he'll give his spiel. All right. All right. So we're going to start to get back into it. If I can get Ben's webcam shared. Oh, there we go. Hey, Ben, how's it going?
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can. And just want to verify you can see the slides still.
Yes, I can.
Awesome. So Ben, thank you for joining with us today. I know we've taken some late night phone calls while we've planned this thing out, and the AB is probably pretty busy right now, I'd assume. So for everyone attending, this is Ben Choubonnet, and he is the training committee chair for the CMMC accreditation body. He's here to share some material with you guys and give a little bit better understanding. All right, Ben, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you, Zach. Thanks a lot. And you said my last name right. That was great. Kudos to you.
I practiced that.
Yeah, my name is Ben Choubonnet, and thank you for coming, everybody, and thank you for Zach and Horatio for giving, inviting me over here so that we could share some information. Obviously, let me give you some background. For me, I come from an education and training background. That's why I'm the training committee chair, but also a cybersecurity background. So I started out actually as a software developer and a programmer. And when cybersecurity became a thing right after 9/11, it became a big thing. It was there before, but it became a much more broadly accepted and also enforced process and concept. That's when I got into it, and I really fell in love with it. And I became a cybersecurity trainer, educator, and then I became an entrepreneur. And I have several businesses that are in that arena. When the AB came around and CMMC came around, I became very interested in that, and I think it's important for all the reasons that Horatio just mentioned. I really appreciated Horatio's presentation because he really covered a lot of the important pieces of why this is even happening. I mean, why is this even happening? I'd rather not have to worry about this, right? I'd rather worry about my employees. I'd rather worry about, me as a business owner, I'm saying from my perspective, I would really rather not be here. I'd rather deal with my employees and my vendors and my products and my services and go out and do the right thing and make money. That's really what we all would rather do, honestly. But the fact is that, as Horatio explained, the world is not such a kind place. And, I always kind of equate it to, would you, if you're a manufacturer, would you leave the warehouse door open at night and walk away, go home and sleep easy? No, you have alarms, you lock doors. And that's really what this is all about, is we need to protect our information, because right now, that is what is worthwhile to be stolen from you, is the information you have. That's really valuable, and we have to protect it. It may be a terrible comparison, but the fact is that cybersecurity is becoming as unavoidable as death and taxes. That's just the way it is, because we have to protect our assets. And your assets are yes, there's the hardware, your office, your employees, your business, your assets, but really the most worthwhile assets you have right now to our adversaries is the information you have in your system. They can get a lot out of that, because they can take your information, they can take somebody else's information, they can take all the different players in an ecosystem, and as Horatio said, come up with the plans for an F-35 and steal them, or worse, affect them, make them unworkable. So I became involved because I wanted to continue my capacity as an educator, but also in my capacity as a cyber expert, and try to make a difference. Next slide, please. All right, so it's really a couple of slides, but I'm going to try to get a lot of information in here, and really I want to give you guys more time to answer any questions you guys have at the end of this. But we just covered the fact that it's become necessary, and the adversaries are out there. I mean, I'm from the Middle East. We have adversaries in the Middle East that 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 right now are attacking us. We have adversaries, China, but but it could also be all kinds of other either state actors, but non-state actors, hackers that just want to sell your information to the highest bidder. They could be just a kid next door. Honestly, these days it is so easy to hack into systems. So we're being attacked from everywhere. So I think a lot of this was already covered by Horatio, so I'm not going to bore you with that. And I really appreciated what he talked about. Okay, so what is CMMC-AB? I just want to talk about this. What is our role in all of this? Well, being CMMC certified or accredited is going to become a requirement for you to keep your contracts with the Department of Defense and soon the rest of the federal government, let's be honest, and or get new contracts. So CMMC means being compliant with a certain set of cybersecurity standards. Well, who's going to make sure you're compliant? That's where we come in. So, going back to the comparison with taxes, we could be called the IRS of cybersecurity, which again is a horrible comparison, right? But is a necessary one. So that's, I think, the issue is we are the enforcement body. So yeah, we could be seen as the bad guys, and I just want to be honest. But the fact is, we are here to ensure the safety and security of the information that the DoD depends on and our nation depends on. So it's an important mission. But we're not going to come into your organization directly and look at your networks and certify your networks. What we're going to do is we're going to work through third-party assessors called C3PAO, certified third-party assessment organizations. So C3PAOs are going to be kind of like your accountants, right? But the ones that enforce it, they're more like the auditors, right? Not the accountants, the auditors. Let's put it that way. Again, going back to the tax thing. But they're independent corporations that are accredited by us. And then those corporations are going to have assessors that are going to be coming into your organization at your request when you're ready for them. And they're going to assess your networks and your systems to be CMMC compliant. And if you are compliant, then you get a grade, you get certified, and you can use that certification when you go to renew your contract with the DoD or get new contracts with the DoD when this thing goes live next year. The way to prepare for it is not to do so through these C3PAOs. You don't want to prepare for your certification using certifiers. When they come in, you need to be ready already. You need to be sure that you're going to pass, because if you fail, if there's no kind of scaled grade, it's not like, oh, you're 70% okay, so we're going to let you. It's honestly, it's unfortunately or fortunately for the nation and cybersecurity, and again, I'm being honest as a business owner, it's going to be difficult, but to wrap our minds around it, it's really not that difficult, as Horatio said, when you really learn about it, but to wrap our minds around it, but we need to actually be 100% compliant to be able to be certified. So that's something you want to be aware of. And so how do you do that? How do you become 100% compliant? You need to be ready so that when you're assessed, you're compliant, you get your grade, you're good for 3 years. So the first thing I want to say is CMMC is a maturity model. It stands for Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification. It doesn't say cybersecure, Fort Knox certification, right? What that means is that you have to look at the level at which you need to be certified, and it doesn't have to be hardcore, have everything in place, and be like Fort Knox, right? So it really means be certified at the right level. Do what is needed to do, and there's really 5 levels. So there's 5 maturity levels, level 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And each level builds on the other. And so some of you may only need to be level 1 certified, which really is only about 17 practices or controls, 17 things you have to do and to change into. Now, each level as it goes up, and depending on the kind of information you're storing, you may need to be at level 3 or level 4 or level 5, and those number of controls increase. So one thing that's really important is to get some help in understanding which level you need to be at. Again, if you're just level 1, you could honestly become a level 1. You probably already are, you just don't know it, very easily within a couple of weeks, and not really expensive. But again, if you are storing sensitive information and dealing with sensitive information, you may need to be at level 3, which is going to take a little bit more work. So it's important to understand the level that you need to be at. You know, from the CMMC perspective, you know, one thing I have here before we move on to the next thing is, you know, we may be ready to start assessing organizations next year, and you get an assessment grade. This is like from January onwards, and you're going to need to look for assessors to come through and give you the grade before you can renew your contract. And it's going to start taking some time, and it might be, you know, maybe a 2 or 3 year time frame before your contract comes up for renewal. You may have some time for that. The problem is that's if you're a prime to the DoD, right? However, if you're a subcontractor, your prime may be enforcing this with you now already, or may already have talked to you, or will very soon. Because when our assessors go into the prime's office to certify them, we're going to say, who are your subs, and are they certified? Are they protected? Do they have the right level of cybersecurity? And so the fact is, you need to be working on this like yesterday, because your prime may talk to you and say, have you been assessed for CMMC? And maybe not assessed by us yet, but maybe your cybersecurity consultant, your accountant type, right, might write a letter saying, yeah, these guys are good to go. They will pass when the assessors come through them. Maybe that's what the prime will require, something like that. The fact is, you need to be CMMC ready as soon as possible, so that if you have a prime you're working with, when your prime comes knocking saying, are you going to pass your test when it's your turn to get assessed, you have some kind of documentation saying that you're ready. And so in that case, it's good to work with any kind of cybersecurity organization that's going to come in and look at your systems and say, well, no, you need to make some changes here. Going back to the concept of, you know, cybersecurity is going to become like death and taxes. The fact is, if you're going to be in business with the DoD or with the federal government for sure, it's not going to be enough to just spend some money, go out and get a loan, spend some money, make sure that it's all done not right now, and then let it go. Another thing about the CMMC is the maturity model, what it talks about, especially at level 3 or above, is that you need to have processes in place, you need to have policies in place, you need to have plans in place for budgeting, for roles and responsibilities to make sure that the cybersecurity that you have put in place, once you put it in place, remains in place. That's another thing about maturity, right? So keep that in mind when you're thinking about getting ready for CMMC, because it is coming and it is going to be unavoidable, unfortunately. Unfortunately, because we have adversaries we have to prepare for, right? Then it really needs to become part and parcel of everything you do, right? And as you can see at the bottom of the slides, the preparation really is going to have to be from top down, from the leadership, not only accepting, adopting cybersecurity as one of the main tenets of your day-to-day business functions. So, for example, as you can see, yeah, it'll touch IT and cybersecurity, of course, because they're going to go through and do the things they need to do from a technical perspective to secure your organization and your information. One thing I didn't put in here is HR, so we'll talk about that as well. Finance, because you're going to have to budget for this from now on. This is going to have to be one of the top, top line in terms of your expenses, budgets. You need to budget on an ongoing basis. You need to show that. In fact, being a CMMC mature organization and being certified as a mature organization means you have plans to budget for and pay for some of these expenses that are going to be ongoing. Legal, Horatio talked about the regulations in terms of cybersecurity, and you might have said just to maintain a contract. Yeah, we're self-attesting that that's the case, and we have cybersecurity. That's cool, and DoD was okay with that. However, you could get sued because you said something that you might not have been very sure of. Not pointing fingers here. I might even be pointing at myself for this, right? But the fact is, there was no certainty in that. Business development. Also, by the way, if you do get hacked, you could also get sued, right? So legal, the legal aspects of your decision making, whether you have a legal department or not, are going to come into play. And also going back to legal is insurance. You don't want to get sued. You go get, or when you get sued, you want to make sure you're insured. Well, insurance is going to start asking very soon. Do you have? If you're a DoD contractor, are you CMMC certified? Otherwise, they may not insure you, and they may not, or they may not have the right price for insuring you. They may be too expensive. Business development, of course, those guys who went out and got your contracts with your primes or your Department of Defense, it's in their interest to be, for the organization to be CMMC certified, because they'll know they won't be able to bid on the contract come next time. So your salespeople, your business development people, your proposal writing people, it's going to be in their interest to ensure that you're going to start getting pushback if you're a leader from your salespeople as well and your business development people that you need to be CMMC certified. And then HR, the one I forgot to put in. Well, of course, part of ensuring your organization is certified and secure is your people need to know how to not open a fishy email, or not pick up a USB drive on the ground and just plop it in their computer just to see what happens, or make sure that they do the right things when they go into a system, into their system on a daily basis, and keeping it secure. So your HR people, your HR people are going to want to train all of your employees in cybersecurity. So really, as a result of CMMC, what we're trying to do, what the DoD has been trying to do, and what we're going to be the enforcement arm of the DoD, is to affect culture change, affect a cultural shift in ensuring that cybersecurity is top of mind. Next slide, please, Zach. So when we have a cultural shift, when we change our mindset and understand that this is simply something we have to do, then we simply prepare for it. And the fact is, it may take some time for us to, it's that fear of change concept, right? It's change is here, it's coming. So how do we handle that? Again, you got to get everybody together, put the budgets in place to first prepare, and the budget, the time and the money to first prepare, and then actually implement the things that you need to do. But think about it this way: once you have integrated in cybersecurity into your thinking and into your processes, what's going to happen is it's going to become a daily routine kind of concept. And the fact is, those costs are going to be, as Horatio also mentioned, are going to be integrated into your daily costs, which is going to increase your price. And that's okay. The DoD is willing to pay a higher price, a higher premium for securing the defense industrial base and thus securing the nation. And then also keep in mind that once you're thinking cybersecurity, once you've educated yourself in cybersecurity, this then becomes not something you have to do all the time, but something that becomes part and parcel of your processes, and you simply live it. So that's what we're talking about when we're talking about a cultural shift, a change in the way you think and you plan, which may be painful at first, but will become easier. Also, as Horatio also mentioned, and I love this presentation, I have to say, you know, there's help out there, and this is going to happen slowly, but we have to, again, be ready for it now. So the sky is not falling. The DoD is there to help. And the other thing that I wanted to say is, you know, we're involved. I'm dealing with all kinds of different, I'm in meetings left and right, talking to organizations within the DoD, the acquisition organizations, you know, training the acquisition people with through DAU, Defense Acquisitions University. I'm working with several different, and that's you know, me and other members on the accreditation board. We're working with several different departments within the DoD, and we are always talking about how do we support small businesses? How do we support and ensure that small businesses are ready and can handle this shift? So there's going to be a lot of support for you. There's a lot of help for you. One thing that we've done is, as the accreditation body, we have created the RPO designation, the Registered Provider Organization designation, and RPOs are going to start coming out into the market by September. And what these are is cybersecurity consulting organizations that have are accountable to us, accountable to the board. They're educated by the board, and so they're going to be a better option. We've also done background checks on them because they're accountable in that they won't cheat you, basically, and that they from an ethical perspective, they'll be educated by us and supported by us. So think about them as the accountants, right? So the C3PAOs will be the auditors. The RPOs will be more like the accountants, the ones that want to help you. They will come in and will support you in getting ready, right? In terms of cost, we talked about this as well. I don't want to, you know, spend too much time because we want to, again, give you guys more time to ask questions. But, you know, prevention is always cheaper. Keep that in mind. You don't want to get sued. You don't want to lose your contract. And we don't want our country to go to our adversary, all the information, all our IP to go to our adversary. So the other thing to keep in mind, and that is my last point, is let's say you're a conscientious organization and you wanted to create a secure environment and you wanted to do the right thing and secure your information, but that was more expensive. You would lose contracts to your competitor that was cheaper because they weren't doing it, right? Now everybody's got to do it. So that creates a more level playing field. So more conscientious organizations have a better chance at, you know, or improving their odds because they get certified and thus they will be eligible to bid for the DoD contracts. That's about it for me. Thank you very much, and I'll be looking forward to your questions at the end of the conference.
Ben, thank you so much. A lot of really good information there. I appreciate you again for taking the time to do this. And you mentioned two really good pieces in there as well. We just received a request from one of our customers on the exact topic you brought up. The prime requested the sub to tell them when they'll meet CMMC compliance, not certification yet, obviously, but just compliance. So primes are asking these questions. Katie Arrington's made some strong statements on what she expects, where her organization expects to see in relation to CMMC. So thank you for bringing up those points. And now I'm going to, let me switch to the next slide. I want to introduce you guys all to Miss Felice Flake. She's a outstanding partner of ours. Our organizations work very closely together. She's got a breadth of experience. She calls herself a research nerd. Hopefully that you don't mind me sharing that with everybody. but she's really into to the compliance arena and helping organizations meet regulations. So she's going to explain levels 1 through 5. Here's Ms. Felice Flake, CEO of CySec.
Thank you so much, Zach. Just to help everyone understand, we're going to be talking about some terms briefly, so that you are ready to hear where they come into play when you're thinking about the levels, when you're hearing about the levels. We have levels 1 through 5. This is really more of what I like to think of as a drone view. If you've ever watched Aerial America, think of this as Aerial CMMC levels 1 through 5. So that you have some introduction. Some of you may have already been familiarizing yourselves with the CMMC levels, and this may answer some questions. It may prompt other questions. We welcome those. Next slide, please. So one of the things that we're going to talk about as we get higher into the levels is the concept of the APT, the Advanced Persistent Threat, and what that really covers. And that's a term that is highly technical in some respects, but on the simplest level is those who wish to do harm. That means if they want to infiltrate your systems, if they want to physically breach your perimeter. It can be as simple as someone trying to socially engineer one of your employees at a professional conference, or even on social media. It builds from different places. It can be done strictly in the technical realm. And we'll not go too far into this because I know we're running a little bit short on time. So we'll go ahead and move to the next slide, please. And so this is a great slide to show you the stages of what an advanced persistent threat is. So you see how they have the recon, the delivery, the exploitation, the operation, data collection, and then the exfiltration. So consider that as we talk about CMMC, and Horatio and Ben have touched on it, that this is really about strengthening the overall health of your organization, not just from the cybersecurity standpoint, but from how well do you want to perform? How well do you want your employees to perform? And that translates into dollars because you're actually showing yourself to be a valuable asset if you are serving as a sub to a prime. Next slide, please. So one of the terms that you'll hear, and it's often referred to as CUI, the Controlled Unclassified Information. And so this is straight from our federal government references, information that requires safeguarding or dissemination controls pursuant to and consistent with law, regulations, and government-wide policies. And then it goes into the specific executive order, the national security reference from 2009, and then all the way back into how it actually evolved from the 1950s. Next slide, please. So federal contract information. FCI is not the same as CUI, or Controlled Unclassified Information. FCI is really related to that information that is pertinent to the contract itself. It's not being shared. It's not out there in the wild. It's not being discussed on social media. It needs to be protected as well. And one of the things that we'll get into with level 1 is that that's the first step in showing your responsibility and that you are practicing good cyber hygiene. Next slide, please. So DFARS clause 252204-7012. This, I hesitated about including this, but I think it's important that we know how this came to be. So when you hear about something like CMMC and you think, oh great, it's just another program or requirement that I have to fulfill, but this has been an evolving situation. So think about, where did this come from? So you'll see that this is related to CUI. This is related to Controlled Unclassified Information. And it's all about what is residing on that internal information system. And you want to make sure this is about, are you safeguarding it? Are you taking every step to actually protect that information. And not just protect it, but to proactively protect it. Next slide, please. So we're going to talk about processes and practices, but right now let's look at what a practice is. A practice is a specific technical activity or activities that are required and performed to achieve a specific level of cybersecurity maturity for a given capability within a domain. So what that means in plain English is that, have you actually done what you're supposed to do? So we'll talk about that as it relates to the different levels. Next slide, please. So when you go to reference, and we're going to be giving you the websites and you can reference the documents, and we encourage you to do so, you'll see that a practice is outlined in these tables, and it gives you a great breakdown. What does this actually apply to? How is this related to other compliance and guidelines and laws that we need to be thinking about as contractors with DoD? Next slide, please. So a process is, we all know what a process is, but as it relates to CMMC, it's a specific procedural activity that is required and performed to achieve a capability level. Processes detail maturity of institutionalization of practices. So when you think about this, think about times in your careers that a team may have developed an incredible training manual, an incident response manual, a basic widget manual, and it got put on the shelf and never touched again. So what CMMC is asking us to do is to make it a living, breathing document. Don't just leave it on the shelf. Part of our compliance in this arena is that we're actually practicing what we've put down in writing, and that they want to see that. Next slide, please. So you'll see here, pardon me, that this is a great illustration, and it's part of the official documents where it shows the levels 1 through 5. And you'll see that level 1 only has 17 practices. And Ben mentioned it, and I was so glad that he did, because oftentimes someone will think, or they've been given half the story and they think, oh, there's no way I'm not even level 1. Well, you may likely be level 1. If you're working with good partners, if you've taken the extra steps, there's 17 practices. It's considered basic cyber hygiene. Level 2 is intermediate. Level 3 is the good cyber hygiene, and that's where you see the leap into the upper realms of the levels and the compliance. Level 4 is considered proactive. Level 5 is considered advanced and progressive. So over the last several months, I've heard several very informed speakers, DoD officials, talk about, we're going to have a lot of subcontractors, small businesses, medium-sized businesses that may just need level 1. There has been reference that level 2 is going to be infrequent, but I think it's important that you look at level 2 because it is the stair step literally into level 3. And you'll notice that you see the 17 practices, the 72 practices, the 130 practices. So there's another graphic that will show how is that built upon one another, because keep in mind that level 5 encompasses all of the other levels and those practices that are required to adhere to. Next slide, please.
And Felice, real quick,
Yes.
you touched on a good point. So you said that and Ben said as well, most organizations are probably already level 1 or really close to it.
Yes.
I think it's important for the audience to know, when you look at this chart that Felice has put up here, level 3 is when you start to see the additional practices. So up until level 3, if you were NIST compliant with NIST 800-171, you should technically already be level 1 and 2 compliant, and most of them are there for level 3. So just wanted to throw that in. Sorry.
Excellent point. Thank you, Zach. That is an excellent point. And I won't belabor the point too much as far as what NIST 171 self-certifying, self-attestation, and what that actually meant. But it is important to realize that if you've already, developed a poem that okay, I need to get on these other, shortfalls quickly, then you're way ahead of the game if you've already got that in hand. So thank you for that, Zach. Next slide, please. So you'll see here, and this is one of the best visuals, and again, major kudos to Carnegie Mellon and the CMMC for what they've developed here. So you'll notice here that there are 17 practices. Then level 2, you add 55 practices, which is where they get the 72 total. And then you go on to level 3, which is where you see the additional 58 practices, and so forth with 26 additional practices, and then 171 practices, for level 5. So with that in mind, if you think about what Ben advised us and advised our audience members, that you have to look at what is the best level for you. What is it that you're working on? What is it that you need to adhere to? Talk with your primes, talk with your customers. What is it that you need to achieve? Next slide, please. So as you delve into the documents themselves, you'll see that there are 17 capability controls. Now, what that means is that you really want to think of them, and to simplify it a bit, is think about it as just categories, areas that you need. It's almost like enrolling in college, that you need these classes to achieve this degree. So if you look at, and many of these are, you see the same terminology because they've built on very reputable credentials and certification information. So you'll see access control, incident response, asset management, personnel security, physical protection, which is one of the big areas that I often see when I'm talking with clients, that they'll spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on the tech side, and they may have spent some money on a great lock on a door, but they've got an employee that consistently puts a book to hold it open. So there are things that you have to think about, that not only are you considering that area, but you're also thinking about how is it actually being practiced on a daily basis. Next slide, please. And so here you'll see that we've gone into the stair steps. You see that level 1, basic cyber hygiene. Level 2, intermediate cyber hygiene. Level 3 is good, considered good cyber hygiene. Level 4 is the proactive, and then on into level 5, which is advanced/progressive. So you think about it, again, that you are building the foundation of where you need to be. So if you right now only need level 1, and 24 months from now, there is a possibility for your company working with a prime or working directly with DoD as a prime, hey, we need to get all the way up to level 3, if not level 4, that okay, we've already accomplished this. So that's some comfort as far as, have I checked this box? Have I completed what I needed to do in that level? Next slide, please. So you'll see here, again, level 1 is about protecting the FCI. It is, you see that it's performed, it's considered basic cyber hygiene. You're thinking about access control. You want to talk to your IT service provider. You want to make sure that they understand what is required and that they can provide that information to you, because when it comes time for the CMMC assessors to come out and take a look at things, they're going to want to see great documentation. Even though it's level 1 and it's not considered that you have to develop to the extent as the higher levels, you need to be able to show, yes, I did it, yes, we are doing it. So think of it as more of an active daily practice. And you'll notice that with this graphic, we're showing that it's performed, so that you see, okay, we've done it and we're continuing to do it, because that's the big That's the big get here, is that are we continuing to do it? Again, next slide, please. So level 2, again, this is a level that has been mentioned as, you know, it may come up rarely when it comes to contracts and what we may see out with the defense industrial base and what's coming down from DoD and the feds. But it's important to understand that it's part of the transition into level 3. So you're looking at it and you say, okay, well, it's intermediate cyber hygiene. Well, it's still addressing all of those categories that we looked at earlier: access control, maintenance, risk management, incident response. So you see it as, okay, are we documenting these processes? Not only have we actually developed and we're practicing them, but are we documenting that we're doing this? And again, this is considered intermediate cyber hygiene and is a great tool to use when you're trying to get to level 3, because of course everything builds on itself. Next slide, please. So level 3, and this is the leap. So it's considered the managed level of processes, and it's considered good cyber hygiene. So you think about it as protecting CUI, the controlled and classified information. And the processes are considered managed, that they're being actively addressed, that they are part of, as it's been mentioned before, you know, that this comes down from senior leadership, because you as senior leaders, you're setting the tone. Your teams are taking their temperature from you. So if you see the value, which there is value because it's going to drive the business side, right? So you think about, am I actually doing this? Am I managing this? Am I documenting this? Are we working with a team of people that are actually working to help us achieve it? Because part of this, and I'm really glad that we have Ben and Ken on our webinar today, but Ben touched on it. One of the things that was a stumbling block with NIST 171 is that you had companies that said, oh yes, I self-attest, I've actually completed and done all of these things. Yet they developed a document in the POEM, but they were not revisiting it. They were not actively trying to achieve those goals as needed, which actually harms us in the defense industrial base, because if our adversaries know, oh, they're just checking a box, they're not really actively doing anything, that gives them opportunity. So next slide, please. So level 4, and this is when you start thinking about, okay, we're elevating ourselves to be part of the seniors on campus, so to speak, that you think of yourself and your firm as you're actively reviewing it, that senior leadership is engaged with their teams. There are processes and practices involved and outlined in the CMMC documents that challenge each of us at that level. Are we protecting controlled unclassified information? Are we actively and vigorously addressing the advanced persistent threats? These are considered reviewed processes because you're looking at it, but you're also involving senior leaders in that review. Again, the cyber hygiene is classified as proactive, which is outstanding because it shows and it actively gives value. Not that the other levels are not being addressed proactively, but this takes to another level. Next slide, please. Level 5. So it complies with all 171 practices, and it is an illustration of an advanced cybersecurity program. So you may hear some people talk about, oh, well, that's only going to be for, you know, the Boeings or the Lockheeds. Well, not necessarily. If we may encounter situations in the next couple of years, as all of us are part of this a fantastic shift, in that you may have subs that are required to reach level 5. But again, as Ben stated, this is about, it's an added cost, you're upgrading one area of your business, but DoD is willing to accept that as a cost of doing business. So when you think of level 5, remember that you're looking at all 171 practices that requires robust professionals on your team, that they need to be experienced. They need to understand what it means to actually monitor, not just where you're watching an intrusion detection, but you're monitoring the global environment. What's going on geopolitically that could impact us? What could be driving some of those hackers out there, some of the hacktivists that exist out there? And it's not just the hacktivists. Again, as mentioned by Ben and Horatio, what we're looking at is that we're seeing this is a business. So we need to view the threat as very real as it impacts our businesses. Next slide, please. And that's all I have. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Felice. Very, very good points you brought up there. And thank you for all the involvement that you've had setting this up. For everybody to know, Felice, I'm not joking when she calls herself the self-acclaimed research nerd, but she put a lot of information there for us on the slides, and we've had a lot of really good discussions leading up to the event. She's organized a lot of it. So thank you, Felice.
Great team. Thank you, Zach.
Yes, and you got us ahead of time. So we'll take another quick 5-minute break, Akin, in group. So we'll come back at we'll come back at 11:45 Eastern Standard. So it'll be a 7-minute break. So we'll do 7 minutes, come back, and then you guys can hear from Akin, and he'll cover some really good topics. All right, thanks everybody. All right, I'm gonna give a few more seconds for everybody to hop back on. I'm showing most of everyone's back. Again, just want to do a sound check, make sure I can hear you.
Sure. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, perfect.
All right.
Awesome. Excited to have you on, sir.
Same here.
All right, so we've done the sound check. Hopefully everyone's made it back by now. I'm excited to hear this next segment. Everyone so far has done good. So
Yep.
again, you got some real pressure on you to close this thing out with some powerful information, sir. We're excited to have you on.
To follow, right? Yep.
Yes. So for everyone, this is Akim Basoy, or I guess natively it's Akim Basoye is the other way to say it, right? And he's the credentialing committee co-chair for the CMMC, and he's going to go over a few slides and give you guys some good information. He's got a really robust manufacturing understanding and background, so it should help a lot of the audience on today. And I'll turn it over to you.
Sure. Thank you. So my name is Akim Basoy. So I run a program designated by the DoD as a National Center for Cybersecurity in Manufacturing. So that explains my particular interest in this topic and in this conference. So I have some unique insights as it relates to manufacturing and some of the challenges that pertain to manufacturing that might not impact other suppliers in the DoD supply chain. So I know I'm the last speaker, so I'll try not to bore you too much. But I also have the benefit of having listened to a lot of good speakers before now, and I think they touched on a number of things that I can borrow from and expand on, right? So I think Kevin opened us up with a description of the manufacturing landscape, where 99% of the operators in this space are small to medium manufacturers, essentially meaning they have 500 or fewer employees, with a preponderance of them having 20 or fewer employees to speak of. So what that means is it kind of, in a way, tells you the kind of challenge they have. So chances are they don't have an IT department, let alone a department that's dedicated to cybersecurity. But they still face the same challenge. They still have to stay secured. So, and I think to further advance that point, I was having a conversation with one of the large manufacturers who was bidding on a DoD contract to refurbish some fighter jets, and this contract is probably going to be worth between 20 and 30 billion dollars. So my question is, how much are you actually supplying of the components, and how much are you sourcing from the supply chain? And I think the answer was just as telling. It says probably 80–85% of that would come from the supply chain. And so, which tells me most of what they're doing is really just putting it together and adding a few pieces to the to the project to make it complete. So where does that lead us? It leads me to believe CMMC is really about securing the supply chain. And when you talk about the supply chain, you're talking about the small and medium manufacturers, because they're 99% of the operators in that space. Now, having said that, when it comes to manufacturing, there are a few things that are unique to manufacturing that makes it stand out as compared to other sectors of the economy. If you can move to the next slide, please. So I wanted to spend a little time to describe some of these challenges that we see when you look at traditional versus manufacturing operations. So when you look at traditional IT operation, most of your focus is on securing data, call it CIA, confidentiality, integrity, and availability of the data. But as you move into the manufacturing space, there are additional considerations for any manufacturing shop. You have to look at the human safety, the environmental safety, product goals, product quality, and lastly, trade secrets, which I think is another one that we should, and I think is the focus of CMMC, right? So when we talk about trade secrets, we're talking about secrets that are unique to you as an operation. we're also talking about secrets that are handed to you as part of participants in the supply chain. We want to build something that's a component that's sourced from you as a company. For you to be able to build that component, we have to share some of the schematics or the drawings with you to be able to build your piece of the puzzle. So how do you secure that? I think it's at the core of the conversation that CMMC has been stood up to tackle, right? So the unique thing about manufacturing also has to do with the fact that we're not just dealing with data privacy and data exposure, but we're talking about data in a different format, data that could be drawings, CAD drawings, or whatever form that takes. And today, part of the challenge that you have is those drawings are not necessarily, so not all manufacturers, especially the small ones, have access to sophisticated systems and CAD systems to actually receive that, not just receive the drawings, but they might also have to print out these drawings in order to make them. So it creates an additional exposure, kind of expands the opportunity for the bad guy to get at the data that we don't want exposed. Now, let's talk a little bit about what the implications of this might be for compliance with the CMMC. So I know a few of the previous speakers mentioned the fact that one of the things that's changing about CMMC is POAMs are no longer accepted under the NIST 800-171, the DFARS rules. You could actually indicate which of the 110 requirements you've met and put a POAM in place to address the rest of them. The challenge that's indicated by some of the previous speakers is more often than not, it just becomes a shelfware where nobody actually goes back to look at them and address them. So the DoD is changing the rules with the objective of actually enforcing and making sure that people go through and take care of the things that needs to be taken care of in order to be to create some level of assurance in the security of the data that's being shared with you. I know there's the cost implication that's been talked about to say, how does this raise the price of doing business? There's bound to be some of that, but I think the DoD is also trying to address that. They actually have what they call allowable cost. Now, I can't get into the details of how that's going to be implemented, but the idea is there's a recognition that maybe it's worth paying a little more in acquisition for certain things, and the additional cost would then fall into the bucket of security, which will be far cheaper than having the data exposed or being stolen by the adversary. So I think the DoD I think there was a number put out about what is it, 600 billion or thereabouts in intellectual property theft. So maybe the idea is, okay, what if we spend an extra 30 billion? We still get 570 billion in savings. I'm talking about the DoD. If the DoD actually goes out and do implement what's called allowable cost and allow suppliers in the supply chain to be able to write off some of the cost of enhancing their posture, their security posture. That will still be cheaper than the current situation that we face. So it'll be a fraction, 5%, so to say. Moving on to the next slide. So the other thing that I wanted to talk about, I see CMMC as a journey. And I think maybe some of the previous speakers alluded to this. So if you go back to the beginnings of this, I think we took part in the RFI just to create that manufacturer perspective to the conversation when it started out. But eventually, part of the recognition that we have to have here is that this is a journey, something that we not only have to put in place, it's also something that we have to sustain over time. So I don't think the bad guy goes to sleep, so neither should we. So what that means is there will be initial effort to get the program stood up and to get to compliance. But after you get to compliance, how do you sustain that? How do you remain compliant? Becomes part of the question that you have to ask. So to get to compliance, let's talk about that for a minute. First is really identifying the nature of the information that you receive. If you're an organization that receives federal contracting information, and that's the extent of the nature of the data that you receive, maybe all you need is a level 1 compliance. Now, that also has to take into consideration if in the future you plan on bidding on other contracts that might raise the level of security that's required to handle the information that comes alongside that, then you do have to prepare for that accordingly. But I think the key thing to note here is that even if you're required to be at a level 1, it kind of provides you with a ramp where instead of throwing your hands up and saying, okay, I've got 110 requirements that I need to comply with, now you only got 17 to get started. So that becomes a little less daunting, and you can actually get going. Okay, 17, maybe this is much more something that I can handle much easier than having to contend with 110 requirements at it from the get-go. And I think that's an important aspect of the maturity model, because it allows you to step into it as opposed to diving into it and trying to keep your head above water after the fact. So I think the other thing that we need to consider is so you've identified the target level of certification that you need. The next step is really to self-assess. How do I stack up compared to, so we'll take level 1 as an example. How do I stack up to all these requirements? Well, maybe you've met 15 of them. You've got 2 more to work on. Maybe you can begin to work on those 2 and make sure you have them met. I also want to recognize the fact that as you go through this exercise, you might not have the expertise. So I would also encourage that you pull in the expertise that you need, even for the purposes of self-assessment, because it's easy to call it self-assessment, but I don't want to make the mistake of assuming that we all have the knowledge level to self-assess. So you pull in the resources that you need. The next step in the process is really pulling in the consultants that you need to address those gaps if you need them. So you might have the same person holding your hand to walk through the self-assessment to identify the gaps that you need to address. And subsequent to that, they might also be in a position to help you start down the path to addressing those compliance gaps that you have. And having done that, so you perform the fixes that are needed, then the next step in the process is to come back through and conduct a readiness assessment. So based on your self-assessment and with input from your consultants, you feel like you've addressed the gap, but you want to kick the tires one last time to say, okay, not just do I have air in the tire, but do I have sufficient air in the tire? So having done that, then you engage with a C3 PAO for certification for the purposes of getting certified. At this time, we have a little bit of benefits of time. So what I would suggest is you get started as early as possible. And what that does is allows you ample time to not just identify the gaps that you might have, address those gaps, and make sure that you're ready for certification. Just to maybe close things out here, I mentioned the unique dimensions that manufacturing brings to this conversation. So you have the purely IT operation. You also have the OT operations, and that's unique to manufacturing. So a lot of your manufacturing floor equipment are increasingly connected to some computer or have embedded devices, embedded computer devices in them. So as you walk through that, you not only have to account for, okay, what do I need to do from a pure IT standpoint, you also have to account for the things that need to be done for an OT standpoint to ensure that both sides of your operations are secure. Uh, so I often hear this conversation about IT-OT convergence or security convergence, but I don't think it's a new concept because keep in mind that a lot of the operators that we're talking about are small shops. So what that tells me is quite a few people wear multiple hats in those operations. So they're serving as OT and IT operators. But it's becoming more of a concept or more of something that's taking hold to say the challenge that you have is more often than not. OT has no clue of what IT does and vice versa. So there's a disconnect between the two. So an important aspect to this journey is bringing the two together and make sure that we are all aligned in terms of what the expectations are, what the needs are to get compliance, and make sure that we address both sides of the house. So in the interest of time, I'm going to turn things back over and take the questions that you might have.
Thanks for that great information, Akeem. And we can definitely, if we can bring back the videos of all the speakers, maybe some questions that we kind of divvy up so we don't put all the burden on one person here. So to wrap things up before we go into the question and answer period, this slide here may solve. I've been reading through the questions. This solves a few of the questions that have already been asked. So I think from what we've heard today from all the speakers, we understand now that, hey, CMMC is here. It's not going anywhere. The DoD and also other, the rest of the federal government is eventually going to go there as well, but it's going to be a requirement for future DoD acquisitions. I've put on here two resources. So the DoD CMMC website, so OSD's materials here, and then as well as the accreditation body's website. So some of the questions that were asked that I've seen already is there a location that has all of the listed RPOs or RPs, C3PAOs? I know I just threw a lot of acronyms out there. So the RPOs, basically the registered provider organizations that are going to come in and help. The RPs are the registered practitioners who are going to come in and they're going to provide some expert advice as well. And then we have assessors and we have auditors, the C3PAOs. So those companies will all be listed on there. You'll go on there, you'll see we've already registered Cybersecurity Solutions. I believe CySec is either already registered or as well or is in the process of registering on there. So that's where you can find some of the organizations that have been vetted by the AB that can really help you out. And I think that the third takeaway from this entire brief, I think every single vendor or every single speaker mentioned it, is don't wait, get started today. You know that it is a journey, like Akin just said. We don't want you guys to wait until you start having contracts come in that are requiring it, and now you have to dash to that sprint to the finish line. So let's dive straight into the question and answers. So a good bit of them have kind of been answered in the background. So the location to go to on the internet to find out who's been certified, that is going to be through the AB website. There's different drop downs that will show you all the companies that are out there that can help you in the specific lanes.
Hey, Zach,
yes.
Zach, I kind of wanted to mention something. I think Ben had mentioned this, and he might be able to expand, but I do believe that the AB is also going to be having a marketplace.
Yes.
I don't know anything about it, but I kind of wanted to give Ben an opportunity to expand on that.
Yeah, it's being developed, and probably within the next couple of months, we're going to have a page that's going to be the AB's marketplace where approved C3PAOs and RPOs and other, partners in the ecosystem will be able to be found, and you will be able to hire them directly from the marketplace, or at least find them, and then of course call them and hire them. We don't have, other than just a listing, there won't be much else, but that's coming. So there will be a page. We have lots of applicants for both C3PAOs and RPOs, and there, we have to do some background checks. We have to be careful about who we bring into the system, and we have to educate them. So, the CMMC AB has been, stood up this year, and we've done a lot. We have a lot to do. So we are not ourselves a mature organization. We're getting there. So we're going to have a much bigger role and availability next year. So the marketplace is being developed and will be available within the next couple of months, whereby you'll be able to select the right RPO, the right C3PAO, and so on.
Awesome. Good point to bring up, Horatio, and thanks for that explanation, Ben. Another one that I'm seeing on here is, have any of the expert panelists seen an estimate of the number of organizations that are going to be impacted by CMMC? And they're asking not just relating to manufacturing. So I would assume that the answer to that would be, Ben or Akin, would be that the 350,000 plus DoD federal contracting organizations are going to be the defense contractors are going to be that piece. But you mentioned as well that expanding to federal government wide potentially. You want to talk on that piece?
Yeah. So the real number is 290,000.
Okay.
That's the number they've come up with. But remember, those are actual primes and first level subs. But when you think about their subs, and then it's like a big tree that expands.
5-6 levels down, even. Yeah. Yes.
Minimum. So especially manufacturing, right? So we're talking millions of companies, honestly, that will get affected, and that's just the DoD. But once it goes to the rest of the federal government, it's kind of crazy, actually. It's a big challenge. I lose sleep at night because we have to make sure all of these people get certified and assessed. So it's a big challenge. That's why it's going to take some time for the assessments to really build up, and that's why they're saying up to 2026. From that perspective, you have some time, although your prime may enforce it sooner than we will.
And that's probably where your marketplace will come into a great effect, where anyone can go out and pick different. So it's not just the AB certifying people. The AB is actually laying the playing field, and then all those organizations will have a different role in the process.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, it's going to be a broad partnership and team of organizations that are going to be involved.
Awesome.
Yeah, one of the questions that I saw was, when the prime gets a contract, what level does the subcontractors will need to meet? And I think that, Ben, we had a discussion a few weeks back on that topic, and you pretty much mentioned depending on what type of CUI the prime is going to share with, and what kind of not just CUI but information the prime is going to be sharing with those subcontractors, that would establish at what level should that subcontractor be. Is that correct?
Good. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Just because the prime is a level 5 requirement, if they're going to share something that has to be a level 1, then that subcontractor will at least need to be a level 1.
It's too much work. I mean, if you imagine if the prime is Lockheed and they're building the F-35, and I don't know who, I think it's Lockheed. I don't know who the builder of F-35 is. And the guys making the screws, they don't need to be at the same level as the main contractor. But the guys that are doing the design of the F-35, maybe they do, right? So it all depends on what you have on your plate.
So the key piece,
and that's why you have to be.
Oh, go ahead, Akin. Yeah.
I was going to point out that's why you have to be very deliberative about what information you share. And I think somebody mentioned earlier on, the principle of least privilege has to apply here, to where you're sharing what you absolutely have to share. And it kind of plays into what I was saying about manufacturing specifically. So if you're talking about the F-35, we're talking schematics, we're talking drawing, Do you share the whole F-35 with somebody that's making a screw, or do you just share what he or she needs in order to be able to make the screw in the right dimensions? And that's where we have to get more specific with information sharing.
That's the point I was going to bring up. That's a great point, Akin. Another piece that I'm seeing here.
I'm sorry, and let me say that Akin has got. I mean, the man is so. I love working with Akin because he's so smart. But it is the truth that if you're the sub who's going to have to just make a screw, and your prime is giving you all this information you really don't need, don't take it.
So push back.
Don't ask for
You're saying to push back.
Because otherwise you're going to have to spend the money to protect that information, which you don't need. So Akin is exactly on point. That could save you lots and lots of effort and money, and save the nation lots of effort and money.
Good strategy, good financial strategy there, right? Risk reduction, so cost reduction. So another piece another question that was asked was in reference to the RFPs that are going to be released. The attendee that asked said that they heard that this was moving back until November. Can you confirm that on those initial RFPs that are going to be released, or is that going to happen in November now, or is it still happening on time?
So there is a lot of uncertainty because so many different things go into this, to doing it right. And it's much more important to do it right than to do it fast, right? Yep. Although we are up against so many different attacks on a daily basis, so the sooner the better, right? The fact is that the DoD has created a time frame for public comment for their rulemaking, and that time frame won't end until December. My own personal, and this is just from me personally, I don't see the RFIs or RFPs coming out this year. However, there may be some pilot RFIs coming out or RFPs coming out that are going to help the DoD perfect this process. The DoD and us, of course.
Right.
So that may happen, and then they will actually most likely engage the DIB, and some organizations may decide to be part of that project, and it would be up to them if they want to be part of that. If you're talking about those, yes, those will definitely happen this year.
Okay.
But whether it's for SCORE or not, and the real CMMC for SCORE can only happen until the rulemaking process is done. What we are talking about when we say the rulemaking process is the specific regulations ending up in the DFARS, and the DFARS meaning the Defense Federal Acquisition Regulations, right? And so that if they're not in the DFARS, they're not real, right? They're just kind of, that rulemaking process is a very detailed process. I mean, it's not a joke. This is not a joke, right? This has to be done in a detailed way. So, it's a double-edged sword. It's a good thing. There's a little delay, more time for us to prepare, but remember that we're also defending the nation together, right? So we do need to get there as soon as possible.
Absolutely. So the next piece I'd like to ask, and maybe Akin, maybe you can give some insight on this one. We've gotten questions on whether at what level or any level at all do MSPs or RPOs have to be certified to, or at least compliant with, before they go out and they start providing services to company A, B, or C, manufacturer D, E, F. What level would you guys say they have to, or is there no requirement on that at this time?
Yeah, I'm not sure that's something we've given a lot of thought to, but I think it's a valid point to bring up. So my initial, this is just me speaking, my initial thought is it depends on what your clients are doing, right? So we've had these conversations at the AB about IL4, which is impact level 4, right? So if you have, if you provide customer service to customers who keep CUI, then I would expect that as a service provider, you would have to be at the level that's required to support those operations. So you have to be at a level 3 or above. I don't know if Ben has additional comments to make, but it's not something I have been a part of conversation about to this point.
Yeah, the C3PAOs obviously will have to be at a high level, right? Because those are going to be doing the actual assessment. They're going to keep track of these assessments and they're going to keep records of it. So they're more like the auditors. But the RPOs are just consulting organizations that are going to come into an organization and help them. It's in their interest not to maintain any kind of secret stuff in their own databases, right? Mm-hmm. So they're just kind of come in and help organizations get there. Mm-hmm. Right now, as Akin said, there's no rules on the level that an RPO would need to reach because they're only consulting organizations. Mm-hmm. They're supposed to help you get there. That might change. As Akin said, there might be some interest in ensuring that RPOs are also safe and secure, depending on the kind of level of information they store about their clients. Mm-hmm. But right now, they're just consulting. They come into your system, they come into your organization, they help you get there. Yeah. So we're not going to enforce security mechanisms on them.
And I think that a big piece. Oh, go ahead, Horatio.
Yeah, one of the things I remember seeing in the MOU, and Ben and Akin mentioned it. You know, those consultants, there's no reason for them to be taking a copy of your CUI and storing it in their database, in their cloud storage or anything. Right, they're going to be there to assess and try to help you understand how do you protect it. However, any kind of service that they're providing today, DFARS already labels that, and DFARS says that you're going to store in the cloud. It needs to be FedRAMP certified, and they have certain levels where they explain for CUI how do you handle. That's still a mandate, right? So if you have an MSP, a managed service provider that hosts their own cloud to do backups, and your information is going to be backed up in their cloud, make sure that that cloud that they're going to be backed up is up to the level where that CUI needs to be, right? We don't. One of the things is I know that as a service provider, I know that there are storage solutions that end up storing in data centers in India, the data center. So you don't want to have a CUI come to find out that it was being stored in a data center that was outside of the U.S., violating the DFARS requirement. So, but that's part of that education that Ben has been talking about. That's going to be provided to those RPOs, and that's why it's really important that you go to the people that are in this marketplace that the board AB is putting out, because they're going to know those nuances like that, right? The regulation might say backup on CMMC, and then it might say reference DFAR 7012. But when you read DFAR 7012, it tells you that the cloud needs to be FedRAMP certified and inside of the U.S., and only U.S. citizens can touch it, for example. So if you're going to have people remoting into the computer where you have your CAD drawings for what you're manufacturing, you might not want to have a help desk technician in India and being able to remote in there, because that's a remote, they're able to take information out also. So it's definitely going to be a good thing to have that marketplace with those RPOs that will really understand those little nuances, so that you don't have to worry as a manufacturer. You don't have to become a cyber expert.
And I'm sure some of the RPOs and some of the MSPs are going to take the path to go ahead and get that CMMC level, 3, 4, 5. We're going to go get it. That's just something that we've said just culturally inside of our organization, is that, there's no better way to give your customers a peace of mind than to say, hey, we've done it too. We've went and we've gotten our certification. So, I want you to trust I would assume you trust an organization more when they say, hey, you want to go level 4. We're actually certified level 4 ourselves. It gives a peace of mind.
You're drinking the same Kool-Aid, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's easy. It's easy.
I don't think it's a requirement from us, but it's probably a great marketing.
Absolutely, yes. So I got a question in here that's actually directed to you, Akin. They asked, what do you believe is the biggest threat to a small business supply chain throughout CMMC? In your experience at MXD, what has been the most difficult thing to implement with employees?
Well, so for a small business, I think the margins are tight, right? So it's always a hard decision to spend money that you don't have to. So But this is a business imperative, right? So if you want to play in this end, it's something you absolutely have to do, right? So, but one of the challenges that I see is the lack of expertise, right? So you don't have the deep pockets to hire the best consultants one can find. So one is identifying, okay, what is it that I need and how much of it do I need, right? So you want to go out and buy get a consultant, but it doesn't have to be the most expensive consultant out there. It's got to be one that's tailored to your need, to your size, to the complexity of your operations. And I think it's a big challenge. So there are so many voices coming at you every day, trying to sell you things you don't need. So it becomes a challenge to filter through all that noise and be able to make the decisions that are meaningful for your own operations. So, and I think that's where the programs like the RPO comes in, because here you're able to tap into a network of folks that have signed some rules of ethics that they're supposed to be ethical and
It's important.
have some fiduciary type responsibility to you as a customer, right? So, and that kind of helps to mitigate some of the risk of all these noises that are coming at you and filtering through that to be able to arrive at the decisions you need to make for your company and for you as a person. So to the other part of your question, you were asking about most difficult thing to implement with employees. I'm going to do my best to answer that question. I'm not sure I fully understand it, but I think this is a key mindset shift, right? So we have the way we've always done things. We've always just done things and it works. So why fix it if it's not broken, right? So that becomes the predominant mindset. So how do you get them to think differently about, well, especially as you move up the chain? So maybe it's sufficient, it's good enough to just do it when you're at level 1. But as you progress up the maturity curve, you're talking about documented processes, you're talking about roles and responsibility assigned, you're talking about managed processes, which means you now have to do more paperwork on top of your regular day job. So that's going to be a major challenge, especially in the small shops that predominant number of players in this space are in. So I'm not sure if that directly answers the question, but that's what comes to mind when I see that question.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, I think that's in line with what was being asked. And another question that I got here that I wanted to make sure we hit, because we're getting asked this question a lot from a lot of our customers, right? Is there's an understanding there's going to be a website or there's going to be resources on how do you truly define CUI. A lot of customers coming to us right out the gate, they say, we need your help because we need to start somewhere to before we can segment and say this is how we're going to handle CUI. We need to know what all is really considered CUI. I think Felice hit some good key terms and definitions there. But do you at the AB, do you guys envision a time when there's going to be resources available or maybe a website or a link somewhere that can help understand what sensitive information is going to be considered CUI in general, or provide examples there?
I'll take this one. This is an ongoing challenge for everyone because the definition of CUI is very complex and also changing and growing. So it's almost one of those things. I mean, in the training aspect, and this is what I'm managing, we're going to be actually in the RPO training that's going to come out in August for new RPOs to take. We're spending a lot of time on exactly what is CUI. How do we define that? How do we identify it? How do we know it when we see it? It's one of those things. It can be easy to explain at a high level, and then all of a sudden you get into all the different, ways that the information is stored, and it gets very complex. right? So it is a challenge. It really is. I'm not gonna, I'm been very honest. You got to be honest about these things. This is a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
So what we train the RPOs is to identify it, to be able to see it, and identify when they see it, right? Know it when they see it. And so I guess the simple answer is, in our training, we will be covering that for our RPOs. But as we mature, we are planning on creating a body of knowledge that anyone can reference, and that's going to be available online. And there will, of course, be article after article after article of CUI.
Okay.
Another thing I can do is I've actually personally gone around and gathered a list of web pages that the DoD maintains and the federal government maintains that talk about discuss CUI and have the regulations listed. And it's actually in some 5 or 6 different places run by different agencies. And that's what makes it difficult and confusing. So what I can do is I can forward that specific slide to Felice, and maybe she can forward it to all the attendees as a value add. So at least you have a bunch of links that you can go to yourself. Now it's gonna read like a dictionary. So this is if you can't sleep at night, it's going to be a great tool for you to get to go to sleep. But honestly, you probably want to depend on the experts to tell you. That's really the answer.
No,
So I do know, in touching a little bit on what Akin had mentioned, Felice, you've been working with on the policy side and the governance and the risk side with some of with a lot of your customers, and with our customers as you're part of our team. What do you have to say about that piece and developing that, implementing that really takes the foundation of that change in culture?
That's a great question, Horatio. It's, the bottom line is having the senior leaders in any organization be a driver behind it. So you lead from the front, and military and retired military, and any of us who work around DoD, we've heard that many, many times, but it is the truth here. So developing the policies and understanding the why behind them is probably the most critical. Now, I do have some clients, they're not concerned about the why. They're concerned, is it accomplished? Has it been taken care of? But then they have employees that want to know the why behind it. So it's important to understand that. It's important to address those questions and have those questions heard, because your employees, even as a senior leader, that you're going to have greater buy-in if they're treated with the respect and value that they actually lend to the organization, and that you're showing to them, because they need to understand, why are we having, as Akin said, on top of their regular jobs, they're going to have another layer. But there are resources for them. They can find their way through it. It's not as painful. It doesn't have to be as painful.
No,
But that is my goal, to make it as the least painful. Even when I ask for homework, we try to make it, the least painful homework.
Okay.
I hope that answers the question.
That's good. That's great. And we're coming up on the 12:30 cutoff. So we did have a few other questions. I feel like we've made some good friends with Ben and Akin. So I think that we can track those answers down, and then as when we send out material, we'll include those as well. I'm sorry for the ones that we did not get to your questions today. But I wanted to wrap in these last 2 minutes just to say, thank you to Kevin. I know he had to drop off earlier, Mr. Carr. Thank you to Akin. Thank you to Ben for being an instrumental part of this webinar. I feel like you guys brought a very good couple jabs, good punches to the fight to help supply some great information and perspective. Also, thank you to our attendees. For everyone in attendance, you will receive some material in your email. We have all your emails from registration. And then I'll leave this here. You'll get a copy.
When we send out those emails, everybody, if you reply back to us, we'll send you one of the cool Got CMMC shirts. So just make sure you give us, if you feel comfortable and you give us your address, we'll go ahead and mail some of those shirts out.
I know I want one, but it's less than $25, so I could do it.
There you go.
It's
There
less
you
than
go.
25. We'll send you one.
There you go.
It's really cool. I love it. I love it. I love that T-shirt.
But I
Well,
hope
thank you all. Thank you very much for inviting us. I do need to go, but it was a pleasure, and thank you for putting this together. It's really, really valuable. So thanks for involving us in this. And all right, have a great day.
thank you all.
Thank you all.